people, may I ask, do we have here? Is it everybody that's on the screen below, or are there more? I never know.
So there's about 21, and people tend to sort of drop and drip in a little bit as we
Okay.
start. But so I want to introduce you all to Franco Romero, who I think you probably have met in other podcasts or seen before. He is the author of The Closet Spiritualist. He's a psychic, clairvoyant, spiritual teacher,
Everything in between.
everything. Yeah.
Well, I
Um,
shouldn't say everything, but yeah, you know what I mean.
um, I don't actually remember how I came across you. I'm trying to think back of how, and I literally can't remember. So, must have been meant to be.
It was such a shock to the system. You've erased it out of your memory.
Um,
That's cool.
okay. And so Franco's had some experiences from when he was a baby. And if you did watch the Next Level Soul episode that I shared in the group for everyone else who was here, you probably have that story. But what I wanted to do, it was just not have an agenda or something question to ask you. I just kind of wanted to be very free flowing, especially
Yeah.
because of what's going on in the world at the moment. There's so much going on. I think one of the first
Is there
people,
something going on in the world? I didn't know
there's
that.
so much going on. And most of us in this group are somewhat discombobulated and not knowing what day is what. And so I'm going to hand over the floor to you.
Sure, what I would love to say, thank you for, first of all, for having me. And secondly, I agree. I'd love to have this as informal and as unscripted as possible. So I would love it to be where as I don't want to take away from your format because I don't know what your format is, but I want it to be where if anybody in the group here has something they want to share or ask, I'd be happy to do so because I really f feel like with a group like this, it's really kind of the nature where we go with this is going to come from really what's on people's minds, and I feel pretty comfortable, as you know, answering questions about pretty much everything. Um,
Yeah.
there are certain things I probably wouldn't necessarily know. Like, for instance, and this is a joke, everybody, but I don't know how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop or anybody who even knows what I'm referring to. But other than that, I'm usually pretty fair about being able to answer questions. So, Mona, let me ask you, was there anything that you sensed because of the way that you said it, anything that you sensed that you'd want me to uh, to clarify or to try to speak to about the nature of the things that are going on in the world um, that would help in the way that you guys go about
Sure.
discussing as a group?
Yeah. So there's a lot of discussion in our group and a lot of feeling about the way time is changing. Like I'm often feeling like it's a Friday and it's not. We're nowhere near a Friday. It's a Saturday and it's not. It's just all gone a bit pear-shaped. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think there's a lot in the group about the Mandela effect and the 3D, 5D split that's occurring. Um, that feels like quite a hot topic. And I think what's physically happening in the world with politics and wars and things, I think we're feeling it more energetically. Like I felt the Trump Biden thing more energetically this time than I did last time. So
Yeah.
just
So,
the energetics of where we are.
so you guys don't kid around, huh? You really get into some serious stuff here. Okay, how much time do I have? Because this might be a while. I'm not one for brevity. So okay, and I actually feel like with most of this stuff, there's a lot of connection to it all. So again, bear with me, and if anybody wants to chime in with a question right away, I
Sure.
really would love it if you do, just because it helps to make sure that I don't lose anybody along the way. Okay.
Okay.
Um, Time, time. Okay, so what's happening right now is that, and you hear these words being thrown out a little bit loosely, but I'll try to put some real substance, some real meat and potatoes to them.
Mhm.
What we're experiencing, and I believe that most people would agree, is that we're going through some sort of energetic shift. And depending on where you're looking at it, if you're looking at it like at the surface level, you're going to make certain conclusions about the shifting, causing certain things on the surface to look either good or bad.
Mm.
Okay. And that's a natural thing to do because up until now, for most of us, we haven't really had a real innate awareness of what's happening internally to ourselves that would cause us to do really deep dives as to how this is really how the external things are really a byproduct of the internalness that we're going through. And I know there's in the spiritual discussions, people have that sense that
Mm.
everything's a reflection of you sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough, and you know this because of the conversations we've had, I cannot stress enough the time in which, no pun intended, the time in which we're living in. Okay. Um, right now, the way that I want to tee this up is that the amount of energy that is coming into this world right now, and you hear a lot about it's a lot, it's intense, it's solar
Yeah.
flares, it's all this. The amount of energy that's coming in right now is equal to the amount of energy that we experience. Let's say I want to go before around the time that COVID started, okay? Which was a pretty intense amount of energy that was coming through.
Mm.
So if you were to take that as sort of your point of reference, and you look at and you try to compare what's happening now with energy, um, we are experiencing on a daily basis the amount the equivalent in energy intensity as we would have experienced in a calendar year around the time that COVID broke out.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm.
So I cannot stress enough that because COVID was pretty, as everybody knows, it was pretty intense, but it took a while for it to seep in and integrate because it was a consciousness energy. Most people may not know that it was a what I would describe as a 4D a consciousness awareness energy, and I could get into that a little bit if need be for
Yeah.
clarification. But but we're entering into a realm of consciousness where, in order to get into 5D, because everybody is talks about 5D, but nobody really has a blueprint by which to know what 5D is all about
Mm.
and how to get there, much less get there. But 4D, people forget that between 3 and 5, there's this thing called 4. Okay, and
Yeah.
nobody talks really about 4D and how and what it is and how do you have to go through 4D in order to get to 5. You don't skip 4D. Okay.
Okay.
But if you hear everybody talk about 5D, you would kind of almost assume that there's no such thing as a 4D.
Mm.
And um, and 4D is an extraordinary level of consciousness awareness that happens in 4D. And it's tied to the Christ consciousness energies, which are all about awareness,
Mm.
and the Buddha consciousness energies, and they're all about awareness, and the divine feminine energies, which is all about awareness. Okay. And so there's this COVID thing was a an extraordinary form of 4D energy that was tied, believe it or not, to the child energies.
Oh,
It
wow.
wouldn't have seemed that way,
No.
but it was a way in which to get people to stop everything and get them to start going inwardly, to explore themselves in yes, there was stress and there was pain and there was suffering and there was mental illness and there was physical death and but it was a very as far as energies goes, a very gentle energy that went into the system that caused everything to come to a complete stop.
Mm.
Okay. and look internally. And so now, what does this have to do with time right now? Um, Going back to the point that I was making was that right now the intensity of these energies that are coming in are extraordinary. And because of that, they're lifting our consciousness into 4D, okay? All of us, globally and individually.
Okay.
And depending on where you fall in that spectrum, you're either going to have more of this experience or not as much of this experience. But it sounds like your group, at least, is starting to get more of a sense that time is becoming nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my spiritual technical term. It's just going
It's a
nuts.
bit
All right,
wibbly wobbly.
it's wiggly wobbly,
Wibbly wobbly, a Doctor Who
wib,
saying.
wibbly wobbly. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to
Like
do that.
jelly.
Okay, but I'll give it a whirl. I'll say wibbly wobbly or just W square. Okay. So,
So sorry, I've got a question just
oh,
to
question. All
yeah,
right, go for it.
it's is the data taken from the Schumann resonance? I think she's referring to the 4D energy. Is that right, Victoria?
What about the
Data
Schumann
taken?
resonance?
The data taken from the Schumann resonance.
What about it? I could tell you a little bit about the
Energy
Schumann
levels.
resonance.
Energy levels. Yeah, tell us about that.
So, so the obviously the Schumann data is what's measuring the amount of solar energy that's coming in. If I'm mistaken, I'm not sure if it measures anything else. It could also measure consciousness on the planet. I'm not sure. Okay.
Mm,
But there is going to be more obvious activity now. Now, these are going to be tied to certain events that most people may or may not see. Some, and they're not anything really to do with 3D either. But there are some metaphysical events that are happening with regard to, say, like supermoons and say with planetary alignments, and this gets into astrology a little bit.
okay.
Um, this also gets tied into the 3 days of darkness and the solar flash that people are going to experience when that happens. Um, what I will tell you, because this can go in different directions with all
Hmm.
this, but what I will tell you is that astrologically speaking, if you will, but this isn't the solar thing isn't really an astrological thing like the moon is and other planetary alignments. Um, you will see more activity happening coming out of solar flares and whatnot because the sun in a sense, is a portal that allows certain energies to come in as well. So in this case, the sun is acting in a way that allows for more 4 or 5D energies to come in, and that's when you see it physically transforming itself into like these solar flares and whatnot that come in and have these magnetic effects on the planet.
Okay.
Um, so, but it's not the only indicator. It's just one indicator, and it's only one vehicle by which energies come through in the 3D space. So I'm hoping that I might have answered that question a little bit, but I will say that that measurement is going to go off the charts here over the
Mm,
next 12 months. Okay. There used to be a time when there were spikes in that measurement that were more almost how do I say this, predictable.
mm,
Okay, but not anymore. Not anymore. These are going to be more non-predictable, and they will be tied at some times to events on the planet. But again, as you know, and probably a lot of people know in this group, that what happens on the planet on the surface is usually the last thing that happens because everything, all the activity is really happening on the consciousness level, both globally and individually. And so when there are individual or global activations of consciousness, then you're going to see those seismic, really noticeable spikes in scales like that. Okay,
mm.
so did that help at all, or did I just
We got a thumbs up for that. So yeah,
yay,
yay.
yay?
So then can we circle back to what we were talking about before I interrupted you? Or we stopped
No,
at
no, not at all, not at all, because this is like a huge puzzle. It's like a
yeah.
huge puzzle, and what I tell people is that You got to look at this in every which way. And you know this, Mona, because of the way that you and I play together in our play dates that we call them. Okay. Um, you can't just look at it from one lens because
Mm,
if you do, then you're going to miss pieces of the puzzle. And so that question was really a good question relative to
mm,
one way in which to see how this activity is measuring up. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So all right. So uh where did we leave off?
4D, 4D and time. So we
Oh,
stopped
okay.
at 4D and time.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is something that most people don't really put much awareness into, but it's really, really huge.
Mm.
And for everybody who hasn't heard me in the past, I'm going to say that pretty much every 2, 3 minutes, I'm going to say something is really, really huge. So it's not to devalue the previous thing that was huge. It's just to let you know that all these pieces are really big pieces and to try to
Mm,
keep that in mind as you're going forward. Most people do not know that 4D is, if they even have given any thought to it, 4D is the way it's been described for years, decades, is that 4D is time. And if you go to look up in Google or whatever, what is 4D? And you'll see time. Okay. That is completely and utterly
mm.
false. Okay.
Okay.
And so and it's not just me saying it anymore. It's me. It's even in the scientific community. Um, the way in which science is now taking these big leaps in terms of mathematics, formulas, algorithms that are used to tap into unknown streams of energy and technology and all sorts of intelligences. All of those things are being reshaped now because of not just this, but this is a biggie, because science itself, the very people that were saying that 4D was time, many of them are now at least underneath the surface, if they're not publicly saying it, they're realizing that time is not 4D. In fact, in many cases, they have gone and saying something to the effect that time is non-fundamental, something to that nature, meaning it's the scientific community's way of saying it doesn't exist. Okay. So you
Right.
can't have time be 4D. So, okay, we're still trying to make the connection here as to why everything's kind of a little bit nutsy patutzy, or as you said, wobbly wobbly or whatever. Okay. Okay. Because when you get into 4D, and we're all still kind of in this play game of 3D.
Mm,
In 3D, I grew up, most of us probably did, with the sense that that 3D was all about time space reality.
mm,
Okay. In 4D, which is going to be subtle because we're sort of playing in a 3D, 4D kind of space right now. In 4D, it goes to space time. Now, so time, space, time. That's a that's big,
mm,
okay, in terms of how the formulas work, because now you're basically saying that time is no longer what dictates space. Now you're saying space is dictating time. And so what happens? Here it is. Here's the bow. If anybody's still around listening to this, okay? Here's the bow. All right. When we're in 3D, everything's linear. It goes across like this, okay? And depending on your time or where you are in life, people say, well, you're getting older, so therefore time is like flying. That's not true. Throw that out the door. Okay. Throw it out the door. All right. It has nothing to do with age, especially now. But time goes like this, linear. Okay.
mm,
In 4D, because space becomes more relevant, time is no longer going like this. It's going like this. It's
mm,
wavy. Okay. And when it becomes wavy and it's still going fast, then you know that time is really accelerating, because if time is still going as fast, if not faster, than when things were going linear, that means it's really having to take a lot of speed to get through this whole thing because it's going like this. So it's like,
mm.
all right. So what happens? What happens is that all of a sudden you blink and tomorrow is Friday. okay?
Mm.
And you swear it was just Sunday yesterday,
Mm.
okay? Or you blink and like I was doing with somebody just the other day, you blink and I said, watch this, watch. I went and picked up somebody and I said, tomorrow we're gonna get together at the same time and I'm gonna ask you this question. Did it feel like I just picked you up 5 minutes ago? And this person's flipping out because they just lost 24 hours in a day because it feels like it just happened 5 minutes ago. But here's the real crazy thing is that days, so with this happening, okay, days are starting to feel, or weeks are starting to feel, or months are starting to feel like days.
Mm.
Okay. But at the same time, days are starting to feel like weeks sometimes. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot, like you're sitting there and you're going, wait a minute, that just happened today, this
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah.
or that just happened yesterday? Because it feels like it was a week ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happening is that space is now impacting time. It's becoming very distorted. And what happens when you go even higher into the 4D realms and 5D is that there's no longer time. Time is irrelevant in 5D. It just becomes a consistent space, which is why a lot of gurus and stuff say that the now is more like now because it's a continuous, there is no such thing as time in 5D. No such thing as time. So why is that important? Well, for the obvious reasons, because it's going to make you go a little bit wooby wobbly because your whole body, your whole mind is like going, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
What this is a clear indication for people, especially in the spiritual community, that they are drifting into 4D, whether they know it or not, because they are seeing the physical manifestations of how time is now starting to be eliminated out of the equation. And the more that this, and it's not going to get any, for anybody who thought this is just a phase that they might be going through, get ready. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning because we haven't even talked about integration, which is what happens when things start to dissolve like time. And that is another mind twisting thing that happens in high 4D into 5D. So that was, I told you, Mona, brevity is not my strong suit. So it's
I've got all
really,
night. I'm happy to stay here with you all night long. That's fine. So, so what happens then when we get into the higher realms of the 4D when the time becomes smaller and space becomes larger? What will that feel like? If we're feeling a bit all out of sorts now, what will
the
the
only
next
reason why
steps
we're
be?
feeling all out of sorts now is because we're still living in two worlds. We're
Right.
still living, trying to balance this concept that there's a linearness to our life. You wake up every morning, clock goes off, you're immediately feeling like you're behind the eight ball because you're chasing time, you're chasing the events that are supposed to happen that day. And then there's this aspect of you that cannot overlook the fact that everything is becoming very nebulous.
Mm.
Okay, so this whole thing, I'm sure that people in this group have probably heard of the biblical phrase that goes to be in this world but not of it.
Hmm.
Okay, it's been tossed around here, there, and everywhere. Okay, and really nobody really gives it too much thought into it. But this is exactly what it feels like, folks, to be in this world, but not of it. And
Mm.
this is, again, just the beginning of how that's going to look. This gets into Mandela effects. This gets into shifting from 3 to 5D, the split Earth concepts that others like Dolores Cannon talked about.
Mm.
We're transitioning ourselves as spiritual beings slowly or fast, depending on where people are at, into another reality that sure enough does exist, looks almost identical to this one, but is no longer adhering to some of the universal, so-called universal laws of like time and space. Okay. It's going to look for lack of better words, as we get into the very higher levels of 5D, and that's going to be like really fast. I'm not talking, I've told you this before, we're not talking hundreds of years here. We're talking about less than a decade, if not less than that. Okay.
Mm.
We're getting to a time where we're going to start to know what it feels like to feel heaven on earth.
Mm.
Okay. where there is no such thing as time, where everything is a continuously flow of now. What does that feel like? Pretty easy. Pretty easy. We make too much out of this.
Mm,
I mean, it's a big deal, but it's still pretty easy. If anyone here has gone on vacation and they throw their watch away, and they throw their phones away, and they just allow themselves to be present in moments and moments and moments and moments, they start to get a sense of what the world feels like to not have time as a measurement of anything that is happening in their life. Days will feel longer to people who are on vacation. When they divorce themselves from the measurement used by time.
mm,
Okay, it's not all that different. You literally, in the space of time, things are happening. In the space of no time, things are still happening just like this, but there's nothing measuring the time anymore. There's nothing measuring the space anymore with time. It just disappears. So everything is a continuous now. It feels and looks the same way. So, in some of the things that I do with my shamanic work is when I do sacred plants with people, I would play this really fun game with them. And that is that we will be doing, telepathic stuff, and that blows their mind. Okay. But then I will tell them, all right, what time is it? And they'll say, oh, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock,
mm,
or whatever. And then we do all these playful things, and we're all very busy, and it should feel like an hour or two went by. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff we do. And I say, look at your phone, look at your watch. What time is it? And the time hasn't moved.
oh,
Okay, doesn't move, and it blows their mind because I tell them before we even do this playful exercise that I take them into the space of consciousness. I take them into my world, into a
mm,
higher level of consciousness that I know how to access that, and I bring them into my world,
mm,
and it looks and feels like we're like what we're doing here, with
mm,
one exception. And in that space of consciousness, which is a high 4D, low 5D energy, probably more borderline on the 5D, they're doing their thing, thinking time is flying by. And to their shock, not a minute has gone by on their clocks or their watches. And we do this a couple of times during the playful exercise, just to give them a sense that in the world that we exist in, time is an illusion. Even in 3D, it can be an illusion if you just took away all the measurements of it. Okay.
S-
So did I answer it? Did I answer the thing about time?
no, I want to ask you some more questions. So,
Okay.
so how does that equate on a regular level? Like I'm dropping my daughter off to school, whatever she's going to school. How will that translate going forward, 10 years, 15 years, whatever? How will that translate if 1 minute is just if the whole day feels like a minute or the time has collapsed or
Well, basically what I said was that you're still going through the movements as if we're doing it right now. It's
yeah,
just that there won't be, the
the,
time
the
will not be
feeling.
a feeling of measurement anymore.
Right.
It's okay. In the world that we are going into in 5D, the things that we know to be normal or regular, as you just said, do not exist there. Okay, I mean, they're just not existent. I mean, for instance, in 5D, there is no such thing as school.
Right.
Okay, I know you use that as an example, but I will tell
Yeah.
you right, there's no such thing as school. All right, there is nothing to learn. There is nothing to be educated on. Everything is a state of knowing. So that doesn't even exist. Okay, what it means is that I could be here one moment and telepathically transport myself into another space instantaneously, or be in two spaces at the same time and
Mm,
not even have flinched because I know that I'm in both spaces. What we know of as this linear space we call 3D does not exist. All the rules, the so-called laws of physics and stuff go out the door. Okay,
mm,
that's why there's so much. Up until very recently, it was very difficult for science to really get their hands around what exists, if anything, outside of 3D, because they're using 3D measurements, 3D tools, 3D concepts to
mm,
try to put their heads around what this could do in a
mm,
4D or 5D world. When they started throwing things out of the equation like time, okay? Started throwing things in more like consciousness, started throwing things in more like wormholes and parallel realities and things of the nature that we used to always poo-poo about or shun off or theorize. When they start throwing those into their equations, they are miraculously finding answers to things because the world outside, and you know this from the stuff that you and I do, together, that the world, we cannot speak the language that we speak in
Mm.
4 and 5 and 6D does not
Doesn't
exist
exist.
here. And so what most people say about me is that I've been able to bridge that gap and help
Mm.
people to feel somewhat aware of what the world looks like beyond 3D by using 3D language. But it's extraordinarily difficult to talk about things that don't exist in this reality. And
Mm.
so the way that we exist experientially in 5D doesn't look close to any of this. Doesn't
Mm.
even come close. It doesn't even, we have no idea in
Idea.
this
Yeah.
of what 5D is going to look like. Okay.
So, as a tiger mum, getting my kids to do their work and get their grades, at the back of my head, I've always felt I don't know why I'm doing this because it's going to be immaterial to them. Get the good job, etc., etc., is
Oh,
going to
yeah.
be immaterial, which leads to one of the questions we've had a few questions. Will we still
We're still on
work?
the topic of time here. I just want you to know. Okay.
But this is linked to time.
Okay.
Will
All
we
right.
will we still work like an hourly paid service?
No,
No?
no.
Okay. Does
And
it cover?
I'll tell you why. In
Yeah.
fairness to the question, I have to explain why. Okay. When we get into the realms of 5D, 5D is creation.
Mm.
Okay, 5D is where we begin to fully appreciate what we're capable of doing. And I really need to stress this, and Mona, you know this because this is my teachings, okay?
Mm.
Um, I really, really have to stress this. We get to we come to a realization of our authentic self as not human beings.
Mm.
We are not human beings. Yes, you can argue, then what do you call this bodysuit? What is this all about? Yes, we are playing in the vessels of and avatars, if you will, of a being, a suit, if you will, that allows us to play a character role in this game, okay, or this thing we call life, however, this play of life. But we are not human beings,
Mm.
okay? So therefore, what are we then in 5D? We are extraordinarily different. I mean, we are on borderlining on becoming light beings
Mm.
again. Operative
Oh,
word, again, okay?
yeah.
Because we are light beings outside of this playful game that we're playing in, although some people would argue it's not very playful, but we are playing the roles of avatars here in this game. But in 5D, we are no longer in a body form. It's very
Mm.
plasmic. There's an extraordinary upgrade that we are going through in 4D that will make our bodies more crystalline, which means from a science perspective that we are going from double helixes to 12 helixes, and we are going to be activating all of those, and we haven't even activated more than 5% of our double helix. So
Mm.
you can imagine what the vessel of the body will be able to accomplish when it's at that level, much
Mm.
less what we are going to be like as light beings. Now, that being said, remind me what the question was again.
Will we be working? I think the
No,
3D,
we will not be
yeah,
working.
the
We will not be
working,
working
yeah.
because when we get into creation, when we become creators, I mean, not when we
Mm.
become it, we already this. We already, you know this
Mm.
from the stuff that I teach. We are not becoming anything. We already are.
Mm.
Okay, this whole thing this is a big game of remembering, and this
Mm.
isn't just me, folks, talking about. There is a lot of stuff throughout ancient times that talk about this type of awareness. Okay, but we won't have to work. That will be bye-bye. Just like
Mm.
there will be no schools, there will be no need for hospitals or healthcare systems, there will be no need for educational systems, there will be no need for religious institutions, there will need no need for political institutions, because none of that matters in 5D. When
Mm.
you are aware of yourself as being everything, being divine intelligence, being godly, okay, you can create whatever you desire. There
Mm,
is no need for you to have to punch in a clock and have to work for something in order to get it. That is all 3D. That
mm.
will all go away. All
And
of it go away.
I think the new generations, the younger people are starting to get that already. That
They are starting to get that
what is
already.
this 9 to 5 nonsense?
Yeah, there will
Um,
be no 9 to 5. There will be no 9 to 1. There will be no 8 to 6. There will be none of that. Working will not be needed. Why would you? The only reason you work is to create something, usually wealth, and the reason you do that is because you don't have the means by which to create it
yeah,
yourself. You
yeah.
will be able to create anything you desire. There will be no need for bartering. There will be no need for financial institutions. There will be no need for any of that stuff.
Wow, can't wait. So, um, does this cover by location? I think that's the shift that we're feeling between 3D and 4D. You mentioned by location. Somebody's asking, does it
By
include?
location, what do you mean?
So when you feel like your body is here, but you're also somewhere else, you might,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. I mean, this is the transition period. This is not going to be an easy period.
no.
If I could just jump from there, from that, use that a little bit as a launching pad to the last thing that you said about the political landscapes and stuff like that of the world. Um, what happened because of the political landscape of the world, and specifically in the US, is that at that point, there was another shift that occurred.
Mm,
And when that happened, humanity as a consciousness chose to go down the path least traveled, and meaning that it would be bumpier
mm,
than it had to be. And I'm not making any judgment call. This is very consistent with prophecies, okay?
mm,
And I don't want to get into biblical prophecies versus indigenous. I just want to tell you that it's very consistent, okay? And humanity chose to do it a little bit more adventurous, let's call it that way.
mm,
Okay. When the shift occurred, things went into motion in a way that it really dictated the way that humanity would go down the path of its awakening and enlightenment. And like I said, it's going to be a little bit longer. Not much. I'm not talking again. You know that my time frames are really short. It's
mm,
going to be a little bit longer, but more importantly, it's going to be a bit more bumpier. And we're
mm,
going to be having to transition those who are enlightened, who are becoming enlightened into these frequencies. And I got to stress this too. This isn't something that you can be the most intelligent person in the world when it comes to spirituality. I mean, you might know your stuff inside and out, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that you are activating higher frequencies of consciousness because you're still kind of stuck in your 3D analytical frequencies.
mm,
So when you start to move into the higher frequencies, and a lot of this is going to be natural because of the way things are being pushed up to the surface, you're still going to have to struggle with what we talked about at the beginning, this balancing act, or what we've been to, even the question that led to this whole thing, the balancing act between these two worlds are going to be significant for you. And this has big implications, not just for what we talked about, but in the way that people handle their day-to-day lives.
mm,
How do you deal with the fact that you're elevating your consciousness while your spouse or your significant others are not? And you have to juggle this transition and understand what their roles are. And you and I, you know this because of, again, some of the stuff I've shown you, but this has to do with the simulated game thing, which is
mm,
part of the puzzle. So, but in the meantime, it's going to be a juggling act with where you are at in terms of your vibration. You're going to be in both worlds, at least two worlds, 3D and 4D. And then when you get into the 5D and you're juggling three worlds, for a little short period of time, because there's really only one elevation into the 5D. But while you're doing that transition, you could be in three different frequencies, and it's going to be wobbly, woobly wobbly, as you said. Did I get that right? Is it woobly wobbly?
wibbly wobbly,
Wibbly wobbly. There you go.
wibbly
I'm getting
wobbly.
there. I'm
Yeah.
getting there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that a number of people have asked this question, and I think this 3D, 5D split conversation on the YouTubes, on the internet, is creating some level of fear in people, as in, or if I get there, is my family going to get there? Are my pets going to get there? Are the people I love going to get there? Are we all going to get there? Um, and another question is, how long is the transition period 3D to 4D? I think you said about 10 years, right?
Yeah,
Or is that?
if we're putting if I'm trying to put it in the most linear way possible,
Mm,
uh, I could tell you that with some people, the transition could be days or months. Okay, I'm seeing that incredible transformation happening with
mm,
people that they're going from really kind of trying to feel this out in terms of academically, conceptually, spiritually, whatever, to seeing them in my own eyes. And if I may dare say, you're like one of them that has really, you know, uh, exploded in that sense. But I've seen it happen in days, weeks, months.
mm,
In other people, it could be months or years.
mm,
Okay. It is really up to each individual.
mm,
And I really, really want to say it is truly up to each individual. They choose how long that transition is going to take. And
mm,
what determines that? What determines that is how willing are they to accept what they are and why they're here, and what the purpose of them being here relative to themselves in the world. These are different than the way that other teachers or the general discussion of this is going, still going down the route of traditional.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. We're not there. 4D is about awareness, not about awareness of what's happening in the world. It's about awareness of who you
You
are.
are, yeah.
Who are you?
Mm,
And this goes back to ancient times and philosophers of all sorts and teachers of all sorts. But I always go back to Rumi. Rumi talks about this really clearly, but he's not the only one.
mm,
That which you are seeking is seeking you.
mm,
You are the one that you are the one that is holding you back, and
mm,
also the one that will spring you forward. This entire experience is about
you.
you remembering that you are the divine intelligence, not a divine intelligence, but the divine intelligence, playing a game that is like a dream state. Okay. Again, if you accept that, at least play with that, allow yourself to imagine that,
Mm,
your consciousness, as you know, Mona, starts to explode. It starts to pick up frequencies that will give you more enlightenment in terms of who you are.
mm,
If you want to try to do it, and I really want you to know, for everybody listening here, that it's beautiful that you're doing it in every which way that is, allowing you to do it in the 3D fashion. A lot of this is, as I say, a lot of human doing this.
yeah.
Okay. It's great. I did it for years. That's why
Yeah.
I wrote the
Yeah.
book, because I was trying to tell people you don't have to do it this way. It's much simpler if you just let go and accept that maybe,
Mm,
just maybe, there's a big, 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 big realization of who you really are that nobody has told you about.
mm,
But others are telling you about it because the people who have gone through near-death experiences, many of them have given you indications that maybe, just maybe, you are a hell of a lot bigger than you ever
mm,
thought you were.
mm,
And that you are so big that literally your awakening, your enlightenment, your everything about this game depends on you remembering.
mm.
Each and every one of you actually have a monster role in changing this reality. But right now, we've been taught not to even consider the possibility that we would have that kind of role, because
Capacity.
never be told that we are divine beings. So I know I missed a question in there somewhere. What was the
No, no,
question?
no. I think you covered it. I think is everyone going to get there? Will anyone be left
Oh,
behind?
yes, 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 yes. Yeah. The way that most people now, I don't surf the YouTube world, so I really don't know what everybody's saying, but I suspect I could guess what they're saying.
Yeah.
And that is that there's this sense of of well, like you just said, that, is my dog going to make it? Is my family, is my husband or my wife or my kids going to make it? And this one is a little bit, there's a couple of layers to this, but the answer to the questions is that when you start to realize who you are and you realize the nature of which this whole reality was created, which, by the way, for those who need a more quantifiable way of measuring this, there are a lot of science behind this now. A lot of astrophysics now is really, they're not close to measuring, mathematically creating a model by which to know that this is a simulation. It's already there. I
Mm,
mean, just from my own experience, my own sort of inner network with a lot of these people, the,
mm,
s- the mathematics is already there that will prove that this is a simulation.
mm,
But for a lot of reasons, this is not something that is going to be leaked out right away, but it will in the next, probably next year of that. Okay. I'm not going to make a bold prediction, but I'm just saying that the mathematics is already there. And for anybody who's in the science community, everything has to be everything has to be justifiable through mathematics. Okay. If you
mm,
can mathematically prove something, then you have basically gone from theory or theorems or hypotheses to fact.
mm,
Okay. So what does this mean? It means that you gotta understand what the simulation is all about, because this is like how we started talking at the beginning, that this is a big puzzle piece. You can't just look at it from one lens. If you look at it from one lens, you're not going to see the whole picture. Okay. This whole picture of a simulation is huge. It's
mm.
massive. Because here's the funny thing, Mona, and I've talked to you about this, is that I tell people, okay, you're in a simulation. And people go, okay, I could buy that. 5, 10 years ago, people wouldn't be really buying
Yeah.
that very much. Okay. But now, much more acceptance of it, far more
Mm,
acceptance. But then here's the thing, they'll go, okay, thank you. And they'll move on.
yeah.
Okay. But wait a minute. I just told you you're in a simulation.
Mm,
I just told you that that simulation is like a game.
mm,
And I told you, even in like in what we do, we get into the nuts and bolts of what that means in terms of the game. And you know this because I torture you in a sense by telling
mm.
you what was, tell me, repeat it back to me what I just told you. And you're
Don't
like,
ask me to do that. I
I
can't.
know. It's not your it's not the thing you look forward to. I get it. I understand. But it's important because remember I always said that if you have to know how to, for your own consciousness mind to be able to experience it and embed it into itself, it needs to know how to formulate it into 3D language.
Mm,
That's one way to know that you have really started to master the concept.
mm,
So, okay, so if that is true, then wouldn't, here's the really crazy thing. So I say, I asked the question, and so I'm actually going to ask the question of this group, who's okay, and see if anybody comes up with the answer.
okay.
If I tell you that this is a game, okay, or a play, a play of life, a dream state, or whatever, if I tell you this, okay, that this is some version of a simulated reality of a game, okay, really not all that different from the digital games that are out there in gaming, okay, the concepts, the principles of them, okay,
Mm.
if that's true, if that's true, what is the most fundamental question you should ask?
I'll open it up, and if nobody wants to respond, I'll say what I think. But if you want to type or unmute yourselves, please feel free. How to win?
How to win? Okay, fair enough. I like that. Anybody else? No? Nobody else?
I think
How
for me,
how to
it's
play?
the
Who said how to play? Doesn't really matter.
Mandy,
But
yeah, Mandy.
Mandy, okay, I'm going to take that really. I won't torture you into asking what you mean by that, which is like Mona said, knows is one of the things I enjoy the most. But I will tell you that you are probably on it or as close to it as anybody could get to it. Okay, because most of the time people will ask, all sorts of different questions about about the game, but they won't ask, how do you play the game? And to be more specific, what are the rules of the game? Okay.
Yeah. So
They won't ask what the rules of the game are. And that is like so fundamental to any version of any game that you play, whether it's a board game, digital game, card game, or anything. You don't go and hang out at somebody's house and go, I got a new game. Let's play it. And then you drop the board game on the floor or on the table. Everybody stares at it, and everybody says, "We're going to just play it the way, however we
mm,
desire to play." It's going to be a free for all. Because when you do that, then you create all sorts of different rules and ways in which to play the game that become extraordinarily confusing. Well, guess what? Doesn't that sound pretty familiar to what is happening here in this reality? We have no sense of what the fundamental rules of the games are and of the game is. And so we don't even know to ask the question, how do you play the damn game? What
mm,
are the rules? And if you don't even ask that, then you're going to go off and define the game however you define it. And usually 99 out of 100 times, you're going to define it the way somebody else has defined it for you. And that's how you move forward, not by what you feel truly is intrinsic in you. Because if you did, you'd probably come up with them. And as you know, Mona, we spend number of play dates on this. It's not just okay, now I know the rules, but there's so many little nuggets inside the rules that you have to be aware of. But
mm,
but none of these rules are meant to regulate or limit you in any way. They're not there to restrict you from anything. If anything, they're there to give you clarity and to liberate you from the restrictions that you have self-imposed on yourself because of your willingness to accept the rules that others have created for you, which is part of the delusion, not delusion. Oh, it is delusion, but it's part of the illusion of the game.
mm.
So I'm sure I answered a question in there somewhere, but
Mm. Yeah.
oh, no, 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 I get
Ah,
it. I got it. I got it. It was about the people, okay?
if everyone's going to
Um,
make it. Yeah.
This is the most difficult part of everything that you will do in remembering who you are. I say that all the time. I say it to Mona. I say it to everybody. This is the most difficult thing you're going to do. Why? Because it is going to challenge your sense of reality when you are juggling two worlds. You are going to be playing in the three-dimensional game when you are evolving into a five-dimensional reality or game version. Okay. So explain, Franco, meaning that the best way to describe it is this way. And Mona, you know this because there's all sorts of discussion about parallel realities, and those all are factored in here, but there's just too much there to talk about. But what I want to basically say is this: if this is truly a dream, if this is truly a dream, like many experiencers have said when they come back from a near death experience, if this is a dream, then what happens in a dream when you have one physically? When you have one physically, you have the dream, you swear that you're in this other reality, which you are, which we won't get into right now. You're having it with people that you've never met before in your life, but somehow they're there. They're your friends, they're your family. You have no idea who they in this world have no idea. Who are you people?
How'd it go,
Okay.
Alex?
Oh, sorry. Can you
What's
mute
that?
yourselves? Go. No, I think people have unmuted themselves and
Oh, okay.
yeah. Okay.
So what I wanted to say was that when you get into a dream state, a real physical dream state, okay, you do not know that you're in that dream state. That if you did, that's called lucid dreaming, and there's a purpose for lucid dreaming, which again we won't have time to talk about. But
Yeah.
when you have that dream in your dream state as a physical being, and you wake up out of it, you don't sit there and go, oh, what happened to all of these people that I just had a great experience with in this reality? I want to go back. I need to go back and get them and bring them back into this world. You don't do that. You don't do that because you realize that it was all a dream. And
Wow.
when you realize it's all a dream, just as you will if you were to cross over physically and you realize the moment that you detach yourself from that body, you will come to realize that this was all a dream. So, what
Mm,
happens to the people? They are all actors in your game that they will reveal themselves to you when you evolve into a higher state of consciousness. which in between lives in this school is actually sort of an adjunct to the sixth dimension, which is what we call heaven. Okay, but it's not actually heaven. It's just an adjunct. It's like a holding space where people are in between lives, okay, as they go on to play another round of this game. But all of the people in your world will reveal themselves when the game is over. Nobody gets lost, okay? I hope that helps.
I think it does. I think there's a lot out there that puts a lot of fear in
I don't
people.
I don't blame, but that's
Yeah,
all part of why people don't want to jump into 4 or 5D,
yeah,
and that because they don't want to leave people behind.
yeah,
But they have to understand that they're not leaving anybody behind. And I talk about this a lot in my book about how everyone has a role here and
mm,
how no one is left behind and how certain aspects of us as consciousness move on to 4 and 5 and 6D. Certain aspects of us go home where this whole discussion about people who have I want to go home, and some spiritual teachers are saying no, home is here, the earth is your home and you're going to evolve with it. That is not true. It is not true. It is home for some people who are here evolving through the
right,
dimensions. It is not true for those that are here helping the ascension. Home is somewhere else. So there's a lot of misunderstanding because a lot of these teachers don't have the insight into what is going on in the higher dimensions because they have gotten stuck in interpreting their spiritual downloads as something that has to be interpreted specifically, if not entirely, in 3D. They
mm,
don't see the broader picture.
mm.
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I really like the example of when you're in a dream and you wake up, you don't go back to try and find those people in your dream. That makes it easier on the heart to
It
understand
is.
that. Yeah.
It is. I mean, and everybody is consciousness. When we understand that we are not the body,
Mm,
we as consciousness will always come back to each other. That's what oneness is.
mm,
That is a universal law, is a
mm,
universal law. We may not come back in the form of a spouse or a daughter or a son, but we will come back in a light being fashion, which is much greater, which is what I talk about in my near-death experience, that when I was surrounded by a gazillion light beings, I knew the light being person that was or thing that was out there and way out there, like way out there. Okay. And there were like trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of beings. Okay.
mm,
And I knew them. I knew them intimately. I
mm,
knew them as family. I knew stories. I knew the story of what I had with them. But the ones that were really close, the ones that surrounded me and gave me the hugs and exploded my whole beingness, they had no they had no physical characteristics. They were light beings. They looked and had a silhouette version of a body. It didn't matter to me. I knew them as so many things, both in this world and more importantly, and I got to stress this, more importantly, in all the worlds that exist outside of this Earth school. I mean, this is a microcosm in the experience of who we are as spiritual light beings. The bigger story is way, way huge, way huge. Okay, in terms of what these light beings represent to us when we get back home, when we get back to our soul group. They're there. They're there.
mm,
They're there. And that is why nobody truly wants to come back once they go into the light, because they understand all of this. Everything is good. Everything is good. It was all just a game.
mm,
Everybody's going to be good. Okay.
mm. Oh, lovely.
Okay.
Okay, so two questions. So when we ascend, will we be helping others?
The biggest thing, the biggest thing, I'm losing my voice here. Look, hold on. Sorry about that. I'm back
Oh,
now.
do you want some water?
And it may help, it may not help. Okay. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Bring it over here. Okay. The answer is most likely yes. And the reason for that is because when you start to ascend, You will know what your purpose here is in the ascension process. Okay. You will have in 99.999% of the time a much clearer and much different view of what that means than what you had in your 3D existence in terms of how you felt you were going to have an impact on the world. Okay. And what I mean by that is this: when you have a full awareness of who you are, you will come to realize that the greatest thing you could have done for all of those who are ascending into the higher dimensions is to remember the process that you went through to get there,
Mm,
because the beings that are going through the ascension process through the law of entanglement will use that information to help them in their ascension themselves. They are only here, everybody is only here to remember and ascend, nothing else. Okay, because again, it's a dream. All right. Your greatest contribution, and why all these, you have stories about all these teachers or masters that all of a sudden one day disappear, or they go into the mountains and they're never heard again, is because they did what they were supposed to do here. They gave humanity a nugget, some breadcrumbs, a way in which to remember who they are. That is the most fundamentally, profoundly, seismically, the greatest thing that you will ever do here is to remember.
mm.
That's it. And I'm sticking to it. Okay.
Okay, so we have another question. How do NHI, non-human intelligences, aliens fit into in this context?
The simplest answer to that, everybody has different everybody has different names for them. NHI, non-human intelligence. I've not heard that one before. But then again, I'm not necessarily um, in that space of discussion. I've heard of NPCs, non-player characters, because that's
Mm,
more of the world that I've been playing in with some of the work that I'm doing. Um, is that I refer to them as dimensionals. Okay. And dimensionals are light beings that exist in the seventh and eighth and ninth dimensions. And I've always referred to heaven as an intermediate space. It's kind of like a place to regroup. Okay, you just had a hell of an experience, no pun intended, and you are there to reap the rewards of what you created, so to speak. There are some experiencers that I've come across in some of the stuff that I do with IANs, that I have talked about this, or that I've had conversations with about this, because I see it very clearly. Heaven is just a transitional phase to where you go into the seventh, eighth, ninth dimensions and beyond, where those become schools again for
mm,
the higher levels of consciousness that are evolving there, where they start to understand the nature of themselves as creators, as
mm,
not just creators within a game, but creators of universes. I mean,
mm,
like big stuff, like really big stuff, okay? And multiverses, and even aspects of the dimensional worlds. So how that relates to here is that part of the coursework in the way that these consciousness beings evolve as they go up the ladder is that their responsibility is to be involved in the creation or the structuring and management of schools like this. And so some of them in the lower levels will play more nondescript roles, like NPCs.
mm,
Others will, as they evolve higher in the ladder, will be supporting actors or involved in more intimately in the actual design and implementation of these worlds. And so the ones that are out there floating around in spaceships and whatnot are more involved in the day-to-day operational stuff. So they are eighth dimensional beings. The ninth dimensional beings typically are the ones that are really responsible and are being graded as their evolutionary process continues in the success of the rollout of the schools and how they actually accomplish higher consciousness. So you
Mm.
don't necessarily see them get too involved on the ground with this Earth school. Usually the ones that are here on the ground, so to speak, are typically seventh dimensional beings that are getting their feet wet into the whole learning process of how to create worlds.
Wow.
And so that's how they play out. These are the ones that will ultimately, when this game is over, they will ascend out of here, but they're going to be out of here by they're going to go home, and they're going to go home to the seventh, eighth, ninth dimension. Some of them will go on to, as you know, Mona, there is a whole level of other dimensions that go from the higher self to the source, and and that's where you get into the world of the angelics and stuff, and some of those will go into the world of the angelics,
Mm.
because that's where home is. So
Mm.
I I I guess that would be the easiest way to describe all of that question posed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Are you still okay to carry on for a little bit?
Yeah, for about another 10 minutes or so,
Sure,
and then
that's
I
fine.
will have to boogie out to another play date. So go
No
ahead.
worries. Any other questions from anyone? Um, how do we know how how would we know if we are in the 5D?
Oh, well, again, you have to go through the 4D to get to 5D. And so one of the things will be obvious to you is that you will have a much clearer awareness of who you are. Okay, so everything we've been talking about, the awareness levels are going to go off the charts for you. And what I mean by that is it is not, excuse me, is not the awareness of, being present in the moment. Yeah, that's good. That's all good. Yay. Okay. It's about being aware of who you are as a spiritual being in the moment. Okay. So all of these various levels of awarenesses with the Christ consciousness, the divine feminine, the divine child, the divine masculine, how they all work, that's going to be huge. Okay. That is, you can't avoid that stuff. And it's not woo woo stuff for anybody that might feel that it is woo. It is huge. It is an intelligence. As you know, Mona, I went to Egypt in January, and I did a whole stuff about sacred geometrical realignments, which was a very high level intelligence of math, of science and mathematics on the pyramids and stuff. And that has to do with the divine feminine and Christ consciousness and the divine child energies. You will know when you're in those spaces. Okay.
Mm,
You will know them because you will know what it feels like to be those frequencies. You will
mm,
know to be those frequencies because you are those frequencies outside of this body. Okay. You're
mm,
not growing into them. You're just remembering them.
mm,
When you get to that point, you will start to go through an integration process, the oneness process. And I will tell you, the only reason I giggled a little bit with that question is because when you do that, when you start to integrate all aspects of yourself, what do I mean by that? Meaning that, whatever you feel are your guides, your angels, your whatever, your masters, whatever, you will come to realize that you will integrate all of that into yourself, and meaning that you are all of that. You will start to integrate your analytical mind with your experiential mind, your heart consciousness mind. You will integrate all of that. It's all integrating. It collapses into itself. I will tell you that when you are starting to do that, you will start to integrate with other beings. Telepathy and actual consciousness integration becomes the next thing. You will integrate into all of that. You will integrate into the game itself. You will integrate into the non-sentient things that you believe are non-sentient, like furniture. Okay, everything has consciousness in it. Trust me when
mm.
I tell you, you will know when you're in 5D, because
You wouldn't.
it will truly be one of the most mind-blowing experiences in this whole thing.
Yeah. I don't think you'd
Okay.
ask the question if you were there. It's just too different from where we are now.
It's just way different. I mean,
Yeah.
I have been fortunately at this phase now, of knowing what integration is feeling like. And I could tell you for a fact from my experience, and it's not, and it's, I'm seeing this in some other people, but in my experience, You'll know when you're in 5D. You will know when you're in 5D. And it's the tip of 5D, okay? When you're
Mm,
fully in the 5D, you will really know it because you will have entered what is called God consciousness, which is not the awareness of yourself being everything. It's the beingness of everything and nothing. You will know it. You will absolutely know it. Right now, I would say that the vast majority of humanity that are even in the spiritual space right now, if you want to call it that, is still very much in 3D with some aspects of 4D now starting to come in. But the good news with all of that is that that part is going to be super fast now. It's not going to take decades to get through that or go into that and understand it and appreciate it and become it. It will be literally, like I said at the beginning, somewhere days, weeks, or months,
mm,
maybe a year or two before you just skyrocket through that phase, and you never really leave that phase, but you start to integrate with the energies of 5D, and everything that has happened this past year, astrologically and whatnot, has been to set up humanity and the grid system of Gaia and the grid system of ourselves to prepare for a massive activation of 4D and some 5D, going into next year. All of it, seismic
mm,
stuff, and you see it through the stuff that is happening again on the surface level. Those things are just pushing it along, but it's not at all, not even close to being what pushes it along. It's just the byproduct of everything that's being already pushed along.
mm,
Everything that happened this year, even going back several years back to COVID, has been a massive, 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 massive infusion of 4D integration coding that is now being seismically activating in people, in the in the latter part of this year and going into next year.
mm,
That's why I call next year the year of the reveal.
yeah.
That's why I call it the year that we say enough is enough,
Mm,
because we're not necessarily saying enough and enough on the surface level. We're saying enough and enough to the illusion of what we've been told we are.
yeah.
We're telling ourselves enough is enough. It's time to wake up out of this
Yeah. I
naughty
feel
little
that.
dream that we're in.
I feel that very strongly. Like
Did I
this
use
year
that?
is what?
Go ahead.
I said I feel that very strongly. Like this year is really ramping up energetically. I feel like I'm going 1,000 billion miles an hour, and then next year something's going to explode.
Yep,
Um,
and that gets back to the original point that I made, that the energy today on a daily basis is equivalent to what we would have received in a yearly basis just 5 years ago.
mm.
It's that intense.
Okay, now we have a number of questions, but I feel like your throat is going.
Yeah, and I need it for I got a
Yeah,
podcast to do a little bit too later on, but
okay. So
sorry about this, people.
that's
So,
okay. Um,
okay.
if you don't mind, I would love to have you back. I will save these questions and we can continue our conversation. Yes, please.
Yeah, some other time, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. For sure. I'd love to come back and talk about it more. Okay. But
There's not.
I'll take one more question if you have one.
Okay, so let me just see which one's the most. Oh, there's too many.
I'm sorry.
Uh, shall we quickly oh yeah, if we intellectually know who we are and are aware but don't feel these integrations, is there anything we can do? So I think the question comes from, and Charlotte, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you're aware that these things are happening, but it's not very obvious to you, what can you do to speed the process on, I guess?
Yeah. So this is fundamentally where I guess I'm going to say this, and I say this in just a really matter of fact way, where my teachings are a lot different than other people.
Mm,
My teachings are that to do what you just asked is to let go. You can get all flowery, to let go or die to the inner self. Okay, if
mm,
you want to say it that way, yeah. Okay, but you don't need to do that. What you need to do is be a child again.
mm,
And then you go, well, what do you mean by that? I know, right? It sounds like there's like a process to it, but literally, as you know, there's a kind of a process to this because we have forgotten what that means, both at a physical level and at a spiritual level, we do not understand the divine child's role in the process of integrating back into ourselves as the either divine feminine or masculine. So the simple answer is to allow yourself the grace to go back into all aspects of your child frequencies in order to make this process a hell of a lot easier to you than the complicated way that it's being served up to most people now, right now, even in the spiritual world, even in the way that it's being taught right now. The more specific thing is that I teach these in courses online, and that's how Mona and I know each other, is because Mona's, I don't know if you said this to people, but Mona is my student. Okay, and so I'm not teaching one-on-one anymore, because I've got some global initiatives that I'm going to be doing here in 2025. But I still have this site. It's a playground, it's a community. It has courses in it. Everybody in that community has gone through these courses and have extraordinarily gone through the awareness process of who they are. And Mona could attest to that. Um, it walks you through gently how to remember these things so that you can do these things easier. And that's the specifics of that. And Mona, if I don't know if you're going to add some of those links
I'll be
on.
adding your links
Yeah,
into, yeah.
but an enormous way to do it simple. I cannot stress this enough. I have done so my teachers, for what they are worth, some of them were they're not, none of them were physical.
Mm,
As Mona knows, my teacher is my specific teacher, but not, well, not the only one, was Babaji or Babaji or whichever way you want to call it. And I went through a whole process of remembering that took decades to do. And I am telling you, it does not need to be decades.
mm,
And I came back with simple messages of how to do this, and I've created courses around them, and I created a community of like-minded beings. They will feed off of each other to help themselves remember. And that is sort of the specificity of what I would tell you. The generalities of it is just give yourself grace to be a child, but there's a lot more to that because you tend to fall into 3D adultism too fast,
mm,
because you just do, and you throw away a lot of the simple principles of this universal law. There is a phrase, and I know there are phrases like this in other philosophies and teachings, and that in religions for that matter, that in Christianity and in Judeo-Christianity, there is a saying: in order to enter into the kingdom of heaven, you must enter it or receive it as a child.
mm,
And that gets overlooked. That's
mm,
like, oh, isn't that sweet? Isn't that sweet? Yay, it's all, child, it's so touching. That is not meant to be anything other than the pure raw truth. If you
mm,
want to enter into the highest levels of consciousness, which we all will be doing, you have to get out of your way and understand the frequencies of the child. And
mm.
that's what I've been trying to spread around the world the last couple of years. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. So it was a pleasure, Mona, as always. And I like to believe that this will have some impact on people here today. So,
100%.
okay. So thank you for having me. And
Of course.
I'll catch you in the community or somewhere
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
our next play date.
Next play
Okay.
date. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody. It was a
Thanks,
pleasure
everyone.
meeting.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Franco. Fantastic.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.